At 5:30 local time in Ukraine, an FP-5 Flamingo missile the size of a school bus roars off a truck trailer. It drops to 50 meters, banks east, and settles onto a course toward one of Russia's most critical weapons plants. 4 more just like it race along behind it. The crews backing their launchers away have no idea that Russia has just committed one of its most valuable assets to stop them, an attempt to prevent a strike that could gut Russia's own long-range firepower. Take a look at this missile, and you're looking at a Frankenstein that flies. A jet engine borrowed from a Soviet-era trainer drags the whole airframe along, buried deep in the tail, and set flat into its spine sits a disc the size of a dinner plate, the single component of this missile Moscow should genuinely fear. They fan out as they run, 5 separate headings instead of 1, because 5 flamingos arriving from 5 different bearings are far harder to untangle than 5 flying nose to tail. A Russian radar operator watches his dish sweep the horizon and comes up empty, so he leans in closer. A return flickers at the edge of the scan. Faint, low, wrong. There for a heartbeat, then gone, then back again. 3 years of hunting drones taught him what a lie looks like on a scope, and this is one. Still, he reports it up the chain anyway. A flickering radar is a radar trying to tell you something. 2 things are hiding that missile from him. The first is the curve of the planet itself, bent just enough to matter. Radar travels in a straight line. The Earth does not. Watch the missile hold at 50 meters off the deck. That's the entire trick. It's tucked behind the bulge of the world, the curvature of the Earth rising up between it and every ground radar for 100 kilometers around. An S-400 can knock something down 400 kilometers out, roughly LA to Vegas, but it can't shoot what it can't see, and it won't see this one until the missile is 30 kilometers out and practically in its lap. The second factor is the missile's own skin. Whatever radar energy does clear the curve mostly passes straight through it. The fuselage is wound fiberglass, not aluminum, a shell built to absorb the pulse rather than bounce it back. Almost all of it anyway. There's one catch, and it's a funny one. The engine housing has to be metal to survive its own heat, so a bright little coin of a return rides along the spine the whole way east. Quieter, but not invisible. Before the morning's over, that one detail gets 2 of the 5 shot down. The dish sweeps past and finds nothing but fields and open sky. The flicker's gone. So is the missile, not shot down, just vanished, running for the deep interior, on a path drawn not to be clever, only to stay low, but low is expensive. Flying where the air is thick, that old trainer engine burns fuel it was never designed to burn, and the meter's running with 900 kilometers still ahead. 200 kilometers south, one Flamingo's dogleg clips a missile battery's engagement zone, and for once, the radar holds the track long enough to actually shoot. A 2-ton interceptor blasts out of its tube, ignites, and races toward better than a mile a second, the launch roar rolling across a town that was fast asleep 10 seconds earlier. It tips over, dives, and detonates 40 meters above the Flamingo, a wall of steel raking a stretch of sky the target has already slid clear of, untouched. The S-300, the long-range backbone of Russian air defense, just got beaten by the ground itself. The interceptor it wasted cost more than the missile it whiffed on entirely. Tax rubles hard at work. The whole miss traces back to one component riding in that interceptor's nose. The 48N6 never actually has to touch anything. Its warhead packs 143 kilograms of high explosive wrapped in thousands of pre-cut steel fragments, triggered by a small radio fuse that fires the instant a target drifts into range. The cloud blooms 40 meters up, A storm of shrapnel, shredding a patch of sky the Flamingo hasn't reached yet. That fuse got fooled. It's tuned to expect something the size of a fighter jet, and down here, it can't tell the missile apart from the ground 150 feet below it, so it reads the dirt and fires early. The S-300 was built to down jets and ballistic missiles at altitude, not something mowing the grass. That exact gap in low-altitude coverage is precisely why Russia poured a fortune into the S-400. The Flamingo grinds on, indifferent, never even aware it was fired at. Every second it spends dodging one battery down in the weeds is one more gulp of fuel it will never recover. Down in a bunker, the crew that waited 3 years for a shot this deep watches their one opportunity bloom over an empty field. The commander keys the mic, reports the miss, and calls for another round. Steady hands, tight jaw. Farther along the route, a radar snaps a lock, and twin 30mm cannons swing onto the bearing, barrels climbing as the firing solution tightens. 3 seconds from opening fire, the lock breaks. The barrels drift off target, tracking nothing, and the missile the crew had already called in slides past and keeps going. That's a Pantsir, essentially the bouncer at the back door, a truck that pairs a radar with rapid-fire cannons to handle whatever slips past the big missile batteries out front. It did everything right and still came up with nothing, because the missile never once gave it a solid target to hold on to. It wasn't lost to a mistake, and Ukrainian jamming had nothing to do with it either. It was lost to trigonometry, the one kind of geometry nobody can jam, spoof, or outbuild. A tracking radar doesn't care about shape. It hunts motion. Anything closing faster than the ground behind it lights up bright. So to filter out the constant roar bouncing back off the terrain, the radar discards anything sitting near zero relative speed, writes it off as ground clutter, and ignores it, a narrow blind spot right around stillness. And this Flamingo's course happened to run crossways to the Pantsir, instead of straight at it, so its apparent speed to the radar dropped to almost nothing. Same reason a car cruising past on the street never trips your garage door sensor. It's moving, sure, just not toward the thing watching for it. For a few seconds, the fastest object in the sky read as still as a fence post, and the filter swept it into the discard pile, along with the weeds and the water towers. The missile didn't plan any of that. It can't plan anything. The planner back in Ukraine who sketched that dogleg on a map just happened to draw it across the beam. 5 missiles crossed the border, and 5 are still flying, each one trading fuel for cover, mile after low mile, like someone driving 30 miles out of their way to dodge a $2 toll. None of that matters to what's waiting up ahead. It isn't sitting on a ridge, it's parked at 33,000 feet with no horizon to beat. 90 minutes out, 10 kilometers above the Volga, an A-50's rotating radar dome sweeps a stretch of empty night sky and paints a solid return where nothing should be. It holds bright and steady, where 3 regions worth of ground radar find only darkness. The operator has it at 200 kilometers, clean, and for one simple reason: he's looking down. He's staring out from an aircraft Ukraine has spent 2 years trying to sink at a missile that has no idea anything's hunting it from above. He keys the network, new track, low and slow, heading 075, passing to control. Somewhere below, a MiG crew's morning just got interesting. They've been on alert since midnight, engines warm, the aviation equivalent of waiting up for a teenager an hour past curfew. Meet the Beriev A-50, Russia's airborne radar post, the aircraft NATO calls mainstay, circling around the clock now because 2 years of Ukrainian strikes chewed the ground radar network to scrap, one dish at a time, until this single airframe became the country's last real set of eyes across a continent-sized nation. From up there, there's no curve of the earth to hide behind, just open air between the rotating dome on the A-50's spine and the missile down on the deck. A big fiberglass hull with a hot metal engine paints just fine against cold ground when you're staring straight down its throat. The man in the ditch sees a wall 2 meters away. The man on the hilltop sees the whole valley and every moving thing inside it. Watch what the controller does next. He doesn't reach for a fighter. He reaches for a phone. He hands the track off to a ground control station, and that station starts walking an interceptor onto the missile with its own radar switched off entirely, silent, emitting nothing, steered completely by the A-50 overhead. And here's the part that should feel genuinely unfair. A fighter jet carries a receiver that screams the instant an enemy radar locks onto it. The Flamingo carries nothing of the kind. No receiver, no warning, no clue the MiG even exists. It holds its heading, flat and level and obedient, while a 30-ton interceptor slides into the sky behind it. Like a car merging into a lane, a drowsy driver never bothered to check. The MiG doesn't chase it directly. It cuts an angle, swings wide, then hauls back in hard until the Flamingo is running almost straight down its nose. An R-37M drops off the rail, ignites, and screams away at better than 5 times the speed of sound, closing the gap before the missile can fly past the edge of a trap it was never built to detect. First contact, a flash on the deck, and one of the 5 simply stops existing. The jet banks, resets, hunts, and 40 seconds later does it all over again. 2 of 5 gone, both flat and level to the very last instant, because flat and level was the only thing either one ever knew how to be. The MiG-31 is what happens when the Soviets build a jet for exactly one job, running down low-flying cruise missiles. Russia's fastest interceptor, Mach 2.8, and it just did precisely that. Its pilot never even saw the impact. He fired on coordinates the A-50 fed him, watched a diamond blink off his steering cue, and rolled to hunt the next one. That wide swing looks like showboating. It isn't. Head on, the Flamingo would have sat in the exact blind spot that beat the Pantsir back at the border, so the controller walked his shooter around the sky until a crossing target became a closing one, dragging it out of the blind notch and into a clean, bright lock. And the missile he fired earns every ruble it cost. The R-37M Seeker is built specifically to reach down through ground noise and pick out one slow, low target, essentially a rifle shot from the next county over, at a target that never even hears the trigger pulled. 2 down, 3 still boring east. So why did those 3 survive? Because even perfect coverage runs into simple arithmetic. 1 A-50, 1 MiG with a finite rack of missiles, spending them one target at a time. And this isn't a quiet night. Hundreds of FP-1 and Lyuchi drones are crossing into more than a dozen Russian regions simultaneously, some of them cheap decoys, shaped specifically to throw back a radar signature the size of a cruise missile. Each one costs less than a used riding mower and still forces a decision out of an interceptor worth more than a house. Up in the A-50, the threat count just jumped from 3 names to 300, and tonight, Russia is short on shooters. While that MiG worked the 2 Flamingos it could physically reach, the other 3 drove 100 kilometers deeper into the dark, slipping into a wedge of sky no interceptor could swing to in time. The cheapest things in the air tonight just bought the expensive ones a clear road, simply by being everywhere at once and not being worth a single missile apiece. The 3 survivors have no idea they made it. Nothing on board to tell them. No data link home. They just fly the line drawn for them, heading down toward the Volga cities, closing on a wall of interference built to shove them off course with a counterfeit signal. 180 kilometers out, the three survivors cross into the thickest electronic murk on the whole route, and every satellite receiver over the Volga starts singing the same fake tune. The forged fix insists the missiles are drifting south of course, sliding toward open farmland, 40 kilometers from anything worth a warhead. They're not. All three hold at 50 meters off the deck, arrow straight, not one shading a single degree off heading. This is spoofing, the clever kind of attack, not brute force jamming, seduction instead. A GPS signal falls 20,000 kilometers to reach the ground, and by the time it lands, it's a whisper, quieter than the background static. A receiver only picks it out because it knows exactly which tune to listen for, and that's the gap every spoofer pries open. The jamming crew never tries to shout over that whisper. They imitate it instead, broadcasting a stronger, flawless fake, and gently walk the receiver's sense of its own position off to one side. The antenna drinks it in, and the missile follows wherever the fake fix leads it. It doesn't work on these three, and the reason is that flat gray disc set into each missile's spine from the opening shot, a controlled reception pattern antenna, a creepa, and it isn't one antenna, but a ring of them wired to a single processor. Picture a man at a loud party with 16 ears. He can plug 15 of them at once, aim each plug at a different loudmouth, and keep the last one open for the single voice that actually matters. The jamming crew ends up shouting into a cone of pure silence, while the real satellites come through clean overhead. And there's the whole electronic fight in one number. 16 ears go deaf in 15 directions at once, and not one more. Add one extra spoofer beyond the spare ears available, and the math falls apart. Down in a jamming truck, a crew watches their perfect counterfeits sail out clean and accomplish nothing. The missiles simply stop listening on their side of the exchange, and that antenna is exactly why the plant up ahead is minutes from being torn open, because it's the very thing that plant builds for a living. The shop that keeps every Russian warhead pointed where Moscow wants it is about to take its own invention straight through the roof. The factory in Cheboksary manufactures the Kometa antenna, Russia's own version of the disc, keeping this Flamingo on course, and stamps them out by the thousand. It's the reason Russian drones and missiles still punch through Ukrainian jamming to hit apartment blocks. Every time Ukraine fields fresh jammers, Russia bolts more ears onto those antennas to beat them. The null bites into the signal. The real fix holds underneath. The gyros, quietly counting every turn since launch, keep the line steady beneath it all. 3 missiles punch out the far side, noses still locked on Cheboksary. 90 seconds out, 16 kilometers from the perimeter fence, a canister mounted on a tracked vehicle inside the wire coughs a missile straight up on compressed gas. The launcher rocks back on its treads as the missile clears the tube. Then the motor ignites and it screams away. The interceptor tips hard onto the incoming Flamingo, and the lead missile comes apart, short of the fence line, fiberglass and burning fuel, tumbling into the trees outside the perimeter. That's the Tor M2. NATO calls it the SA-15 Gauntlet, a short-range interceptor, built to guard exactly one site and nothing else, parked inside the perimeter, waiting for precisely this moment. The crew nearly missed it entirely. The Flamingos didn't come in from the southwest, where Ukraine sits. They came from the northeast, overflying the whole region 170 kilometers out, sliding past near Ulyanovsk, then hooking back to approach from a bearing nobody had a gun trained on. That fuel the low route kept burning back at the border bought exactly this move. A 1,000-kilometer flight stretched past 1,500, Chicago to Houston, 1 liter at a time. A $500,000 missile burned through its entire fuel margin to slip past the deepest air defense belt on Earth. For one thing alone, surprise, a blind missile can't improvise, so the whole detour got baked into its flight plan on a laptop hours before the trucks ever rolled. Low and flat, with no diving arc to catch on the way down, it handed the tour crew only seconds of warning, where a straight-in approach would have given them minutes, almost enough. That tour still managed what an S-400 battery worth $500 million couldn't pull off all morning, and the reason comes down to where it's sitting. Every trick that carried the Flamingo 1,500 kilometers was really about avoiding radar, but the last radar sits on the target itself, and the target is the one thing this missile absolutely has to fly straight at. Head on, the blind notch disappears, the Doppler signature is huge, and a missile doing 850 kilometers an hour paints hard and steady. Right system, right geometry, finally. But the tour's radar sits only a few meters off the ground, so its reach against a wave skimmer stays short, barely a dozen kilometers, giving it only a handful of seconds for a clean track, and 2 more missiles are already inside that window. Behind it, the second Flamingo throws itself forward, and nobody lays a finger on it. It crosses the fence line, noses toward the main hall, and drills into open ground 100 meters short, throwing up a crater and a column of dirt and absolutely nothing else. 100 meters, that's the 14-meter CEP, circular error probable, doing exactly what it does. Draw a circle around the bullseye just wide enough to catch half your shots, and that's your number. 14 meters in clean air on a good day, and this was neither. That antenna spent the entire final run wrestling with the spoofers, targeting the missile's own position sense. It won by enough to keep the missile flying, not by enough to keep it precise. The fix drifted a few meters became 100. Cheap guidance, an honest miss, the price of building these by the hundreds instead of by hand. Now the map is down to a single Flamingo, one missile, one aim point, one last thing standing over the target, a net. Look at the towers ringing the main building, 15 of them, erected since the last strike and strung together with heavy anti-drone mesh. Russia put it up to catch the quadcopters and light drones that had gutted this plant before. It stops a 50-kilogram quadcopter, cold, tangle, sputter, drop. Nobody has ever flown 6 tons into it at 800 kilometers an hour. In about 4 seconds, everyone finds out what happens. 30 seconds. The last Flamingo comes in flat and fast, the whine of that old trainer engine rolling ahead of it across the rooftops. 10 seconds. The tower line rushes up to fill the sky ahead. 5-6 tons of missile hits the mesh and drives straight through it without shedding a single kilometer per hour, punches through the roof, and buries 1,150 kilograms of warhead deep inside the building before the fuse. Holding back a deliberate fraction of a second, finally lets go. The net might as well have been a grocery bag stretched across a highway. All that mass doesn't argue with a net, it just files a complaint on the way through, and the walls meant to stop the warhead become exactly what traps the blast, nowhere for it to go but straight in. The building heaves up off its foundations, then folds in on itself. Windows blow out across Cheboksary as a column of smoke climbs into the morning. The same smoke half the Volga region will be filming from their balconies before the fires are anywhere near out. Every Shahed that finds an apartment block, every Kaliber, every Iskander, every glide bomb, all of them need the antenna that was built inside that hall. Moscow can rebuild the machines, it can't rebuild the months, and somewhere in Ukraine, the crews are already loading the next 5. We'll keep bringing you the strikes as they land, so hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment with what you want to see covered next.